Hello? Wait. Yeah, okay, they're supposed to hold the line and also attack and also divert a bunch of their forces to another command. Well, how are they supposed to do that? The order doesn't say how to do it. It just says do it. Right. August 22nd, 1941. Imagine you're an army commander and you fought the good fight, but you've run out of ammunition and food and been surrounded by a larger enemy force. You surrender to save your men's lives, but from this week on, if you're in the Red Army, you've officially just committed treason. I'm Indy Neidell. This is World War II. Last week, Winston Churchill and Franklin Roosevelt met in Newfoundland and created the Atlantic Charter, a statement of the principles of their policy and a condemnation of the aggressive nature of others. Adolf Hitler issued new orders about the direction of his attacks on the USSR, and down in Ukraine, those attacks once again take POWs in six-digit figures. But there is still plenty of fighting there this week. In fact, some units of Heinz Guderian's panzers from German Army Group Center have been pushing south, and by the 18th, they and 2nd Army's infantry have taken Pochep and nearly reached Gomel. His attack also threatens to separate the defending Soviet 13th and 21st Armies, which would drive a wedge between the Soviet central and southwestern fronts. Back on the 14th, Stalin tried to prevent this, and Stavka created the Bryansk front under Andrei Yermomenko to close the gap between the central and southwest commands, and to protect Kiev from an attack from the north. A command is a temporary headquarters and it's superior to a front, right? For this new front, he sent in as much new tech and equipment as he could, battalions of T-34 tanks and batteries of Katyusha rockets. The force is to counterattack into the gap between Gerd von Rundstedt's spearhead in the south and Guderian's approaching panzers. On the 21st, Hitler issues orders that the entire 2nd Army and entire 2nd Panzer Group should all attack southward into Ukraine. The renewed attacks will begin in a few days. Semyon Budyonny has already begun withdrawing as many Soviet troops as possible behind the Dnieper River. And on the 21st, the Soviets pull out of Gomel. But the defeat and the capture of Generals Ponedelin and Muzichenko last week in the south has prompted Josef Stalin to take action. On the 16th, he issues Stavka Order 270. He issues this in his capacity as People's Commissar of Defense, a post he took over from Semyon Timoshenko on July 19th. You can read the full text of the order below, but it basically goes like this. It has a preamble that lists specific examples of Soviet leaders who fought their way out of encirclement, followed by specific examples of those who failed to do so and surrendered, like Ponedelin. The actual orders are that anyone, no matter the situation, even when surrounded and out of supplies, anyone who attempts to surrender instead of fighting on to the absolute last must be destroyed. Their family members are subject to arrest and will not receive any state assistance for the loss of husband, father, or son. Divisional commanders are also ordered to either demote or shoot on the spot commanders who do not directly command battle from the battlefield. Many of the leaders that have been captured so far, including, again, Ponedelin, are now accused of treason and tried and sentenced to death in absentia. As Stalin reportedly says, there are no Soviet prisoners of war, only traitors. Adolf Hitler is also issuing orders this week. See, on the 18th, OKH Chief of Staff Franz Halder presents Hitler with yet another plan for driving on Moscow, but Hitler rejects it the 21st. He says, the Army's proposals of the 18th of August for the further conduct of operations in the East is not in accordance with my intentions. His orders this day are, the most important aim to be achieved before the onset of winter is not to capture Moscow, but to seize the Crimea and the industrial and coal region of the Donets, and to cut off the Russian oil supply from the Caucasus area. In the north, the aim is to cut off Leningrad and to join with the Finns. So Army Group Center is to remain on defense and loan its right flank to a move that, together with Army Group South, will drive the Soviet 5th Army across the Dnieper, and then they'll occupy the Crimea. Stalin still believes that the main German threat is to Moscow. Mikhail Kirponos, defending in Ukraine, argues again that Kiev is under serious threat. Georgy Zhukov who lost his post as chief of staff for pushing the Kiev idea and now commands the reserve front, sends Stalin a telegram saying, "Hitler is throwing all of his shock, mobile, and tank units against the central, southwest, and southern fronts, while defending actively against the western and reserve fronts. That the south is the focus of the German attacks. And if you think Stalin ignores these men, then you, my friend, are wrong. He assigns Yermomenko's new front the task of taking care of Guderian, but he also insists that Kirponos defend Kiev. We've seen before that Kirponos wants to abandon the city and withdraw beyond the Dnieper. So the 19th, Stavka issues new orders for the defense of the Kiev region. The 5th Army will be pulled back to the Dnieper and build defenses on the west bank. The 37th will defend Kiev on the west bank there, and a 40th Army is to be formed and deployed under Lieutenant General K.P. Podlas to take up position on the Desna River and defend against Guderian coming down from the north. The Germans are advancing in the north as well this week. The Soviet and German attacks in the Staraya Russa region that we saw last week are still inconclusive by the end of this week, as the German 10th Army Corps tries to break free and the German motorized units try to destroy the armies that encircled them. But the Germans enter Novgorod the 17th and on the 21st take Khodovo, cutting the rail link between Moscow and Leningrad. As for those units of Army Group Center, whose task it is now just to hold the line, after the encirclement of the Soviets at Smolensk was over 2 weeks ago, the withdrawal of the German motorized divisions from the front to be refitted and reinforced proceeded in earnest. This, however, is taking longer than anticipated. Thunderstorms last week liquefied the already crappy road system, and that is just one factor that influenced how much rebuilding you could actually do. Without a doubt, the delusionary assessments upon which Barbarossa's pre-war logistical plans were built now revealed themselves. Not only was the army struggling to meet even the most rudimentary needs of the front, while also supporting the refitting process, but in theory, the whole army would soon need to continue advancing a great deal further to the east. The absence of a usable rail system has forced them to rely on trucks that were never intended to bring so many supplies so far in such bad conditions, and the trucks just cannot do it. The implications of the failing transportation system for the all-important refitting process were clear. Without the necessary preconditions, the Panzer divisions could not be restored. There's also this. From the beginning of the campaign, 10,000 German officers have become casualties. Halder estimated the 15th that they will need 16,000 for the remainder of the year, but there are only 5,000 available. Army Group Center Commander Fedor von Bock is also seriously worried about the ability of playing defense in the wide open spaces of the USSR. He talks to Halder about this, and Halder writes in his diary, "Changing over to the defensive in the present position is not possible. The front of the Army Group, with its 40 divisions over 730 kilometers, is so strained that moving to a determined defense entails far-reaching considerations which have not been thought through in detail. The present disposition and line organization is in no way suited for a sustained defense." But if true, then this spells disaster for the Germans, for by now it is no longer easy to move forward, but also not doable to make a sustainable long-term defense. And you can understand Bock's worry. He's supposed to hold the center, attack in the south, and also send mobile forces to the north. And the Red Army has displayed a remarkable ability to create new divisions as fast as the Germans destroy the existing ones, and this is not just by chance. See, for most of the last 2 decades, the Red Army had used formations that only had a few active soldiers during peacetime, but would fill up with volunteers and reserves during wartime to become full combat units. As the 1930s wore on, and the threat of war grew larger, they did not stick with this concept and mobilized most units to active duty status. But, and this is important, since pre-war Soviet thinking estimated that during heavy warfare, the army would have to be replaced every 4 to 8 months, in 1938, they enacted the Universal Military Service Law, which obligated reservists to service until they were 50 and set up schools to train those reserves. So when Germany invaded with 3 million men, the USSR had 14 million men who had received at least some basic military training. So the Red Army, for all of its glaring problems and shortcomings that we've seen lately, has a formidable depth and resiliency. David Glantz talks about this in Operation Barbarossa and points out that the process of producing new units has changed since the invasion began. Since July 29th, the main directorate for the formation and maintaining of the Red Army has seen to it that the military districts outside the active war zones have set up systems for cloning existing units. But even back by the end of June, over 5 million reserves had been called up and 13 new field armies raised in July, with 14 more this month. Of course, the pre-war and mobilization divisions were by no means equivalent. For all their shortcomings, the divisions lost in the first few weeks of battle were far better trained and equipped than their successors. The newly mobilized divisions and brigades lacked almost everything except rifles and political officers. They had little time to train as units. Their performance contributed to the German impression of an inferior enemy who did not realize that he had already been defeated. The Germans, though, are also getting reinforcements. On the 20th, the Blue Division, made up of Spanish volunteers for the German army, is formed and heads for occupied Poland. This is a force from Spain under Major General Agustin Muñoz Grandes that will fight the Soviets. Their name comes from the color of the Falangist party uniforms that the men initially wear, but they will be given German uniforms and equipment. They are officially numbered Division 250. And another army, though not getting reinforcements, is getting replacements this week. The Australian 9th Division has been under siege at Tobruk for months, and by now Thomas Blamey, commander of the Australian Imperial Force, supported by the Australian government, is requesting its withdrawal. Claude Auchinleck in Overall Theatre Command agrees to this, but in order to avoid aerial attacks, such a troop movement can only happen on moonless nights in fast ships. The new moon this month falls on the 22nd, at the end of the week, but from the 19th, and continuing all next week, 5,040 of the men of the Australian Infantry and Indian Cavalry are evacuated, and 6,116 Polish riflemen and Czechoslovak infantry are brought in, along with around 1,300 tons of supplies. Oh, and far to the east on the 17th, the US sends a formal warning to the Japanese along the lines agreed last week in Newfoundland. They still have not taken a decision on the Japanese proposal for Prime Minister Fumimaro Konoye to meet with President Roosevelt, but in a couple of weeks will decide not to let it take place. They are worried that Konoye would not be able to make the Imperial Japanese Army and Imperial Japanese Navy stick to any agreements that are made. And that brings us to the end of the week, with pretty draconian new orders from Stalin, firm orders from Hitler to head south, and Army Group Center wondering how it will fulfill a variety of tasks all at the same time. Other than just changes in direction, though, there is to be a change in procedure for the Germans this month. See, back on August 1st, SS Commander Heinrich Himmler witnessed an execution by gunshot in Minsk. He had the misfortune, according to SS General Karl Wolff, of getting a splash of brains on his coat. And I think it also splashed into his face, and he went very green and pale. He was heaving and turned around and swayed, and then I had to jump forward and hold him steady. Well, Himmler asked Arthur Nebe, head of the German criminal police and a general in the SS, to come up with some new method of mass killing. Himmler is soon to get his wish. For this month at Auschwitz, Deputy Camp Commandant Karl Frisch is conducting experiments in killing with gas, using a commercial pesticide on Soviet POWs. This pesticide has an irritant added, so that those who use it on insects will be warned that it is nearby because of the noxious smell, and they will know to steer clear of it. But the irritant is now removed to avoid causing panic among those humans on whom it is to be used. The German trade name for this pesticide, the active killer of which is hydrogen cyanide, is Zyklon B.